We've done a lot of talking about canvas. We've done a lot of talking about paintings. What we had looked at was paintings on canvas. We looked at paintings on board, because some of them were on wood. We did not yet deal with paintings on paper. And I want to now start talking about paper. I had mentioned before that paper is a slurry and it needs glass, and that's why it needs glass, that it's just layers of pulp that are glued together by the starch of the paper itself. It's inherent in the paper. By the way, I also want to put a proviso in there that I'm giving very surface level information on this. I'm not going into depth about production and influence and effect and stuff like that. So paper-borne art has to be dealt with differently than paintings do, than paintings on canvas or paintings on wood have to. The reason is that it is susceptible to dust, it's susceptible to environmental issues, heat, sunlight, the artist having dirty fingers while they're working with it, or the owner having dirty hands while they're working with it, or spilling a cup of coffee on it, or blah, 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 a whole bunch of other things like that. So, in terms of paper-borne art, you have paper-borne art where there is a white border. You can see the paper around the edge. I'm not talking about reproductions, I'm talking about original works of art. And then you have other works of art that are what we call pleine page, which is actually a French word, but it's been absconded with and used, where the image covers the whole paper. So there is no white around it or no color of the paper showing through at the outside edges. The method in which to deal with them is slightly different with each one. The reason is when it's pleine page, because I'm somewhat of a purist, I don't want to cover any part of the image with the mat. Again, to keep the purpose of the mat is to keep the glass off the paper. It's an absolute that you need to have glass to protect paper, that's a given. And then we want to keep the paper away from the glass so that you have air where moisture can be reabsorbed into the air so it doesn't condense. That means that we either use a mat board or a spacer to lift the glass to create a space between the glass and the artwork. Mat board serves two purposes. One, it helps define the artwork, because when you put the mat board on it, you're actually creating this space. I'm going to use white just as an example, so you're using it as a white space around the artwork, which helps define the artwork. When the artist has created something with natural white space around it and includes it in the artwork, whether it's a photograph or a print or a drawing or any one of those different formats, then you need to use a mat to limit the eye. But when you have the pleine page, it's dealt with differently. If I put a mat on top of it, then what happens is I'm covering a piece of that artwork. And I'm imagining that the artist, in having done that, did the pleine page so that all of it is visible, not just some of it. So then it becomes a question of approach. How do we frame something that is pleine page, or how do we frame something that has its own natural border, paper border around it, that the artist defined that way? I haven't discussed reproductions, because posters and prints that are reproductions, multiples, doesn't really matter how you deal with it, because you can replace the content easily. There's less concern that, it might destroy, the framing might destroy the artwork. That doesn't mean that it shouldn't look nice. It just means that that's a lesser concern. Framing newspaper, same thing. The issue with stuff on paper artwork on paper is that the inks and paints that are used are subject to UV light. That's light from sun, that's light from fluorescence. In fact, fluorescent lighting gives off more UV than the sun does, in a home anyway. So we then have to use glass, should the client choose to, use glass that'll protect the artwork from UV, because UV will make the colors fade, or will actually change them. So when you have the quality of inks, the quality of paint, the quality of pastels, the quality of a whole variety of different media that you use to create the image, the better the quality, the more pigment, the less filler that's in it. The more pigment that is in there, the more resistant the color is to the effects of UV. Since we don't know, when we look at the artwork after it's been done, what quality of materials the artist has used or what they are most comfortable with, then we start to use a glass. If we want to protect the artwork, we'll use a glass that has a UV filter in it. That means it'll it'll cut off 99% of UV light that can filter through. Just out of curiosity, regular glass, because of its thickness, and UV has a very sharp angle. That means it's shallow, so it doesn't go deep into anything. The glass, normal glass, cuts 45% of UV light. Specially treated glass cuts up to 99%. Now, back to paper. The way we present the paper will be defined by, I'm repeating myself, by whether there is the white border there or whether it's plein page. In terms of mat board, there are a whole slew of colors. When I say a whole slew, I think I have probably about 400 different mat boards, of which probably 15 or 20 are whites. They're different hues of white. I'm a purist. That doesn't mean my clients have to be a purist. I like to go with whatever color the paper is, that's the color I want the mat board to be, or at least as close as I can get. Because if I start to create a contrast, or if I start to put in another color in there, then I'm competing with the artwork. What I want is I want the viewer to focus on the content completely. A mat board, I'm trying to figure out how to do this so that we can, I'm talking about it, I will show you very soon what it does. Mat board has a depth to it. So it's cut with a bevel, and because it's cut with a bevel, the eye goes softly into the artwork. We can double mat, that means put two mats on. We can double mat with two mats of the same color. So we create a smooth flow to direct the eye. Or we can double mat with one color and one not color with a thin amount of the color showing. By doing that, we're making a line around the artwork. That sometimes focuses your eye, right? It's like when you underline a line that you're written, you want the eye to focus, and that's what you do. Again, I'm less comfortable, but that's personal. And I always tell my clients what's personal and what's more de rigueur, and applies to, in general, to everything. So you have your mat, you have your content, and once you've chosen your mat, you go to the frame, because the color of the mat and the color of the frame will influence each other. It's hard to describe that colors bleed onto each other, but they do. Because colors bleed into each other. So one color beside another color will affect the color. I still remember Joseph Albers in the 20s, researcher in color, started doing artwork showing square within a circle or a circle within a square. And he did green on the outside, orange on the inside, and then changed them. And the colors look radically different depending on which one's outside and which one's inside. So color influences everything. The color of the frame will influence the color of the mat and will influence on what you're looking for in the artwork. People come and they say that they want to pick out a color that's in the artwork and put that in the mat or put it into the frame. I'm not a fan of that because my mat board and my frame are much more solid color than any color that is inside. So when I choose those colors, what I'm actually doing is competing with the color that you want to highlight. If I went with a complementary color, then I'm highlighting the color that I want highlight inside because it complements it. It doesn't compete with it.